It started like any other evening segment on The Daily Show. Jon Stewart, with his signature smirk and fast-talking wit, sat under the warm studio lights, shuffling a stack of cue cards. The crowd, mostly progressive and college-aged, roared in anticipation. The topic of the night? Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old White House press secretary whose unapologetic conservatism and viral speeches had become lightning rods in the media. And Jon wasn't planning on letting her off easy. He clicked to the next slide on the LED screen behind him, a photo of Karoline speaking at a college summit, passionately defending school choice and parental rights. "Here she is," Jon said, pointing dramatically, "America's youngest press secretary. Sharp suits, sharper tongue, and apparently a college diploma that no one's ever actually seen." The audience gasped, then laughed. Jon leaned forward, cocking an eyebrow. "Look, I've tried. I've looked up Karoline's educational background, some vague mentions of St. Anselm College. But no records, no transcripts, no honors, just a lot of noise about faith, freedom, and Donald Trump." He paused for effect. "Now, I'm not saying she's lying. I'm just saying, if I had the nuclear codes and I was taking notes from someone who might have barely passed Poli-Sci 101, I'd like to know." The audience erupted. Backstage at Fox, Karoline Leavitt was watching. The volume was down, but the captions were loud enough. She sat stiffly on the leather sofa in the green room, her silver cross necklace catching the light as she leaned forward. Her assistant, Brian, stood awkwardly near the door. "We don't have to respond," he said. "It'll blow over." Karoline's eyes narrowed. He wants to make this personal? Let's get personal." She stood, straightened her navy blazer, and picked up her phone. A single tweet was all she needed. "Jon Stewart, you questioned the wrong woman. Let's go live. I'll bring my diploma. You bring your facts. Let's see who teaches who." The tweet exploded. Within 15 minutes, Karoline versus Jon was trending across X and Truth Social alike. The next morning, CNN made the call. "We'd like to host a face-to-face. No pre-questions, no moderation bias. Just you and Jon. Live." Karoline didn't hesitate. "Tell him I'll be there." She closed the call, turned to Brian, and said quietly, "He thinks my education is the weakest part of me. He's about to find out it's the sharpest." The day of the showdown arrived with the weight of a Super Bowl Sunday in political circles. CNN plastered its homepage with a slick promo banner. "Karoline Leavitt versus Jon Stewart. Unfiltered, unscripted. Live tonight." The internet had already chosen sides. On X, Team Karoline trended among MAGA loyalists and college conservatives, while Stewart smashes trended among progressives and late-night comedy fans. YouTube creators teased reaction videos before the debate even aired. Podcasters labeled it the Clash of Convictions. Karoline arrived at the CNN building in Manhattan just after 5 p.m., flanked by 2 aides and carrying a slim black folder. The folder contained exactly 2 things: a certified copy of her St. Anselm College diploma and a sealed transcript. She wore a fitted navy blazer, her hair neatly pinned back, and the silver cross still glinting softly at her collarbone. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble lobby as producers rushed to escort her through the maze of studio corridors. Jon Stewart was already in the prep room. Surrounded by staff, he reviewed his talking points and off-the-cuff zingers. But something about this appearance felt different. Normally, he thrived on ridiculing power. But Karoline wasn't a bumbling senator or a fringe pundit. She was young, sharp, and fast, and she didn't play defense. "Are we sure this is smart?" a producer muttered. Jon shrugged, half joking. "If I die on stage, tell my dog I loved him." In the final moments before air, Karoline stood alone in the wings, watching the intro roll across the studio monitors. The announcer's voice boomed, "Tonight, a special edition of CNN Prime. A face-off between one of America's most iconic political satirists and the youngest White House press secretary in history, Jon Stewart and Karoline Leavitt." The crowd cheered as Jon stepped out first, greeted by applause and a few playful chants. He waved, adjusted his tie, and flashed that famous smirk. When Karoline walked out, however, the energy shifted. It wasn't just that the audience didn't expect her poise. It was the way she took her seat without hesitation, back straight, chin high, her eyes already locked on Jon like a laser. Anderson Cooper, sitting between them at a glass table, cleared his throat. Thank you both for joining us tonight. The subject that sparked this debate is Karoline Leavitt's education credentials, but we'll also be discussing what qualifies someone to shape a nation's narrative. Jon leaned forward, tapping his pen. Let's start simple. Karoline, did you graduate college? Karoline gave the faintest smile, cool and deliberate. She opened the black folder, took out her diploma, and placed it upright on the table, facing the cameras. With honors, she said, in political science and American studies. Gasps fluttered through the audience. Jon raised an eyebrow but didn't flinch. Okay, but what did you actually learn? Karoline didn't blink. Enough to recognize when someone uses a joke to dodge an argument. Want me to explain how? Jon's smirk faltered for just a second. And that's when the real battle began. Jon Stewart tapped his cue cards gently, trying to reset the rhythm. He was used to dominating with charm and punchlines, not facing down a 27-year-old who came prepared for war. But he pressed forward, slipping into his signature style of veiled mockery. So, Karoline, he said, his voice smooth but loaded, you graduated. Great. That still doesn't explain how someone your age becomes the mouthpiece for a former president who, let's be honest, isn't exactly a classroom favorite. The audience laughed, but it wasn't as loud as before. Karoline didn't flinch. I didn't come here to talk about popularity, she replied. I came here because you implied I didn't earn my place. So let's talk about merit. She opened her transcript and slid it across the table. Jon barely glanced down. A perfect GPA in political science, double major, Dean's List all 4 years. But Karoline wasn't done. You mocked my education because you thought it was the easiest way to discredit me. You thought I'd crumble under pressure. But here's what you didn't count on. I wasn't trained by media. I was trained by reality. Jon leaned back, lips tightening. Reality? You work in the White House. How real is that? Karoline's voice didn't waver. Real enough to sit across the table from you and defend myself with facts while you toss punchlines. The audience murmured. Anderson Cooper tried to cool the tension. Let's bring this to a broader point. Jon, are you saying someone like Karoline, with her credentials, isn't qualified to serve in high office just because of her age? Jon sighed. No, Anderson. I'm saying we should be cautious when someone this young speaks with this much certainty. Confidence isn't competence. Karoline leaned in. That's funny, because last I checked, you spent 2 decades confidently telling people how to think, while never holding any office yourself. The crowd gasped. Jon blinked. I never claimed to speak for the country. Karoline didn't let up. But millions took your words as gospel. You influenced elections, ridiculed leaders, and shaped narratives, all from behind a desk armed with sarcasm. That's power without responsibility. And yet I'm the one being interrogated? A hush fell over the studio. Jon tried to laugh it off. Look, this isn't about me. Karoline raised an eyebrow. Isn't it? Because when you mock someone's degree on national television, you're not questioning their education. You're questioning their right to be taken seriously. And if that's your strategy tonight, Jon, you'll need a better lesson plan. Jon looked rattled. Not defeated, but clearly pushed off script. The crowd didn't know how to react. A few clapped, some murmured. But something had shifted. For the first time, Jon Stewart wasn't just hosting the lesson. He was in it. Jon Stewart leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. His signature smirk had returned, but it lacked its usual bite. Karoline Leavitt had not only matched his energy, she'd redirected it. The audience could feel it. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a chess match, and Karoline had just forced him into defense. All right, Jon said, adjusting his notes. You've made your point. But let me ask you this, Karoline. Since we're on the subject of credentials, do you think graduating from college makes someone morally right? Smarter? Better qualified to speak for a president accused of Well, a few things. The audience chuckled. Karoline didn't blink. Number A degree doesn't make someone moral. Neither does a comedy show. But if you're going to question my education as a way to undermine my judgment, then I'm going to question yours. Not your diploma, but your discipline. Jon blinked. My discipline? You built a career by pointing out hypocrisy. That takes talent. But now, you're using that same skill to distract people from ideas you don't agree with. The crowd shifted uneasily. Jon straightened. Are you saying I shouldn't challenge people in power? He asked. No, Karoline replied calmly. I'm saying you used to challenge everyone. Now you just punch one direction, and you assumed I was too unqualified, too untested to push back. Anderson Cooper tried again to mediate. Karoline, let's stay focused. Jon questioned your educational background. You've answered that. What do you want viewers to understand now? Karoline looked straight into the camera. I want people to understand that credentials are not permission slips for public service. They're tools, and they're only as useful as the courage of the person holding them. The room went quiet. Jon tried to regroup. So, you're saying courage is more important than education? I'm saying courage without knowledge is reckless, Karoline said. But knowledge without courage is useless. I've seen both in Washington. I chose to bring both. The crowd applauded, not roaring, but thoughtful. Jon tapped his pen on the desk. You came here loaded. Karoline nodded. I came here underestimated. Big difference. Jon chuckled, finally letting his guard slip. You know, you might be the only person to ever turn this table on me. She smiled, not arrogantly, but like someone who had been preparing for this moment her whole life. You made it easy, she said. You brought a joke. I brought my notes. By now, social media was exploding. Clips were already being cut mid-broadcast. Hashtags like #Karoline Schools, Jon, and #Diploma Drama trended across platforms. Viewers weren't just watching a debate. They were watching the unexpected emergence of a new kind of conservative firebrand who didn't play defense. And Jon Stewart, one of the most revered figures in political satire, was no longer the one writing the punchlines. He was in them, and the studio lights gleamed off the glass table as Jon Stewart leaned in, no longer smirking. The game had changed. Karoline hadn't just dodged his attack, she'd redefined the conversation. And worse for him, the crowd wasn't laughing anymore. They were listening. You came here to fight, Jon said, quieter now, almost reflective. Karoline didn't flinch. I came here to correct the record. You started the fight when you mocked my degree on national television. You questioned my legitimacy, so I brought my receipts. Jon nodded, glancing at the camera, then back to her. I've spent my career making fun of politicians. I've earned my share of enemies. You earned respect because you exposed hypocrisy, Karoline replied. But now you target anyone who threatens your worldview. That's not satire. That's gatekeeping. A ripple ran through the audience. Jon sat back. For the first time all evening, he looked vulnerable. You think I'm threatened by you? He asked, trying to mask it with disbelief. I think you're surprised by me, Karoline said plainly. You thought I'd be a talking point with blonde hair and a party line, but I'm here because millions of people, and especially young conservatives, are tired of being told they don't belong in intellectual conversations, especially by people like you. Jon took a beat. You think I'm part of some intellectual elite? Karoline raised an eyebrow. You've sat behind a desk for 20 years, shaping narratives, calling out power. You're more establishment than I am. I grew up in a working-class family in New Hampshire. Paid for school myself. Interned under pressure. Earned this job. And I didn't inherit an audience. I had to earn every viewer. The silence in the studio was louder than any applause. Jon rested his hands on the table, the bravado gone. You're right, he said. I didn't expect this. Anderson Cooper, sensing the weight in the air, asked softly, Jon, what do you think you misjudged? Jon looked at Karoline, his voice lower, slower. I thought I was punching up. That's what comedy is supposed to be. But maybe I punched wrong. Karoline didn't gloat. She leaned in, her voice calm but unwavering. I'm not your enemy, Jon. I'm not a joke. I'm a product of the country you say you love. I believe in hard questions. I believe in disagreement. But I also believe in giving people a chance to prove themselves before you mock them. A long pause. Even the crew behind the cameras stopped moving. Then Karoline added softer. You thought I was the student. Turns out you were the case study. The audience didn't know what to do. Clap? Stay silent? The line hung in the air like fog, thick and unmovable. Even on social media, the usual noise had slowed, replaced by clips of Stewart nodding, silent, while Karoline spoke. For the first time in years, Jon Stewart wasn't the one delivering the final word. He was listening to it. The credits hadn't even finished rolling before clips of the debate flooded the internet. Karoline Leavitt calmly laying her diploma on the table. Jon Stewart sitting back, visibly stunned. That final line, you thought I was the student. Turns out, you were the case study. Had already been turned into a meme, a quote card, and a ringtone. Backstage, Karoline removed her microphone and handed it off to a stunned producer. I'll see myself out, she said, her voice as cool as it had been on air. Anderson Cooper caught up to her in the hallway. That didn't go the way we expected. Karoline turned slightly, her expression unreadable. That's because you expected a press secretary. You didn't expect a person. Before he could reply, her phone buzzed. Hundreds of notifications. Her assistant, Brian, was already calling. Karoline, he said breathlessly, the White House just issued a statement. Trump saw the interview. He loved it. He wants you front and center at the next rally. Karoline smiled faintly. Good. Let's give them more to talk about. Meanwhile, on the other side of the studio, Jon Stewart sat alone in his dressing room. His staff hovered awkwardly nearby, unsure whether to speak or leave him be. For a man who built a career on decimating politicians, tonight had felt different. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, running over the debate in his head. The parts he'd rehearsed, the jokes he never got to say, the moment he realized she'd brought not just facts, but conviction. She was good, he finally said aloud. A staffer nodded. You think she won? Jon didn't answer. Instead, he turned to his laptop, opened X, and began scrolling. One tweet after another. Karoline Leavitt just dismantled Jon Stewart with a smile and a transcript. Jon asked for credentials. She gave him a lesson. This is Gen Z conservatism. Get ready. He paused at a clip of Karoline quoting him back to himself. An old Stewart monologue from 2007 about respecting young voices in politics. The irony wasn't lost on him. By morning, Karoline's inbox had exploded. Conservative networks flooded her with interview requests. Campus organizations begged her to speak. Even a handful of liberal commentators admitted she had held her own, and then some. Breitbart ran a banner headline. Karoline crushes Stewart. Truth over sarcasm. The New York Post followed with, Case study, how a young conservative flipped the script. But it was a quiet email from her old college professor that caught her attention. I watched. You didn't just defend yourself. You defended every student who ever felt underestimated. Well done. Karoline stared at the screen for a long time before typing two simple words. Thank you. In the next 24 hours, she would be on the road again, this time heading to Michigan for a rally, where thousands already carried signs reading, educated, empowered, unapologetic. And while the cameras would soon fade and the hashtags shift, one thing was clear. Karoline Leavitt had not just survived Jon Stewart. She had redefined what it meant to sit across from him and win. In the hours following the CNN showdown, Karoline Leavitt's name was no longer just trending. It was reverberating. Clips from the debate hit every platform. Her final line to Jon Stewart, calm and calculated, was shared with captions like, she flipped the interview, and the power dynamic. The conservative media universe lit up. Fox News aired a primetime montage of Karoline's best moments. Newsmax called it a generational shift. Even Tucker Carlson, now independent, posted a 5-minute commentary praising her restraint and composure. She didn't scream, she didn't pout, she taught. Capitol Hill noticed. Senator Josh Hawley tweeted, "Jon Stewart picked the wrong Gen Z to mock. Karoline's not a student. She's a professor now." Speaker Johnson privately praised her. Kevin McCarthy, however, remained silent, reportedly uneasy about the amount of influence she was now commanding. Inside Trump's inner circle, reactions were split. Some aides admired her. Others whispered concerns. "She's getting too big too fast," one advisor told a reporter off the record. "This kind of momentum is hard to control." But Donald Trump himself was clear. He called her that night. "You crushed him," he said. "Totally crushed him. Stewart didn't know what hit him. I want you front and center at the next rally." Karoline didn't gloat. "Thank you, sir," she said. "But I didn't do it for applause. I did it because I'm tired of being talked down to." He laughed. "That's why you're dangerous, and that's why I like it." Meanwhile, Stewart's camp had gone quiet. Behind closed doors, there was reflection, even regret. Jon, watching the clips in silence, reportedly told a producer, "She was better than I expected." That wasn't just a debate, that was a reckoning. Karoline, for her part, stayed off social media for the night. No victory lap, no quote tweet. Just silence, and a single glance at her reflection in the dark window of her apartment. Not a pundit, not a puppet, but a player. Finally, on the board. The email arrived 2 days after the debate. Subject, Invitation, Harvard Political Union Guest Address. Karoline stared at it for a moment, surprised. Harvard? The same Ivy League institution where conservative students were often jeered off stage? She half expected it to be a joke, but the note was respectful. Formal. "Your recent appearance on CNN sparked debate on this campus. While many students disagree with your politics, we value diverse viewpoints. You are invited to speak before the Harvard Political Union." Her aide, Brian, immediately flagged it. "This is a setup. They want to humiliate you." Karoline disagreed. "Number, they want to see if I'll show up." And that was exactly why she would. The auditorium was packed. Inside, the air was thick with curiosity, skepticism, and a touch of hostility. Protesters lingered outside holding signs. "Degrees don't equal truth. No platform for hate." But inside, students filled every seat, waiting. When Karoline stepped onto the stage in a navy blazer and black slacks, her silver cross gleaming faintly under the lights, the silence was palpable. No cheering, just a collective breath. She walked up to the podium, scanning the crowd. "I know most of you don't want me here," she began. "Some of you may even believe I shouldn't be allowed to speak. But here I am, not because I expect agreement, but because I believe disagreement is where real thinking begins." A few murmurs. Then silence. "You say you're the party of inclusion," she continued, "but only when it's comfortable. I came here because I'm not afraid of disagreement. You shouldn't be either." By minute 5, the room had shifted. Some students leaned forward, others put their phones away. Karoline spoke not with rage, but with purpose. About her working-class background, about being underestimated, about how she didn't ask for pity or privilege, just space to speak, and she got it. When she finished, the applause was measured but real, not a standing ovation, but not silence either. She walked off stage alone, no entourage, no flash. Outside, the protest had quieted. And online? A new clip surfaced. Karoline, in front of a Harvard crest, saying, "I didn't come to convert. I came to be heard." That line would hit 1 million views in less than 24 hours. Just as Karoline's Harvard speech reached its viral peak, a new thread started trending on X, and this time, it wasn't about politics. It was personal. A woman named Lindsay Colburn, a former college acquaintance, posted a scathing thread. Karoline Leavitt wasn't some genius student. She mocked professors, skipped classes, and said once that politics is just theater. She's fake. Don't buy the image. It hit hard. The story was unverified, but it didn't matter. Screenshots don't need truth when they have timing. MSNBC pounced. The View ran it as a developing story. Even late-night hosts mocked her. So much for straight-A Karoline, one joked. It wasn't a policy debate anymore. It was a character assassination. At the next press briefing, a reporter asked bluntly, "Did you lie about your academic record, Ms. Leavitt?" Karoline didn't blink. She calmly reached into her folder and held up a document. "My transcripts, verified, signed, GPA and attendance logs. And for the record, I've never claimed to be perfect, just prepared." She let the moment hang. But if we're now discrediting women in politics because someone from college has a grudge, then I have to ask, why are we so afraid of women who speak confidently and stand firmly? A pause. Silence. Then, a ripple of respectful clapping from the press corps. Back in her office, her aide Brian waited. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she said. But her tone was tight. Karoline wasn't shaken by the accusation itself. She'd faced worse. What bothered her was the betrayal. Lindsay hadn't spoken to her in years, yet here she was, trying to pull her down just as she was rising. She looked out the window. "They don't want me to succeed," she said quietly. "Not because I'm wrong, because I wasn't supposed to get this far." That night, conservative commentators fought back. "Karoline delivers receipts," one headline read. "Proof over gossip," said another. Even some left-leaning voices admitted the smear lacked substance. But Karoline didn't reply online. She let the moment breathe. Because the truth didn't need a rebuttal. It needed only to be seen. It was nearly 11 p.m. when Karoline stepped into the private lounge at Trump International Hotel. The energy in the room buzzed, staff moving quietly, TV monitors playing muted news loops, and Secret Service at every door. Then he walked in, Donald J. Trump, unfiltered as ever. He extended a hand. "You know, Karoline," he said, grinning, "you've done more damage with a transcript and a straight face than half of Congress with a microphone." She smiled politely. "I just told the truth, sir. They weren't ready for it." He motioned for her to sit, tossing a thick folder onto the coffee table between them. "This is the future," he said. "New advisory council. Strategy for the campaign. I want you in it, not just behind the podium, in the war room." Karoline raised an eyebrow. "And why now?" Trump leaned forward. "Because you're not afraid. Not of media, not of Harvard, not of your past. They threw everything at you. And you're still standing. That makes you dangerous to them and valuable to me." She didn't answer immediately. She flipped open the folder. Pages of polling data, messaging tests, swing state maps. It wasn't just an offer. It was an invitation to shape the national message. "I'll consider it," she said. "You already are," he replied. That night, she walked alone back to her apartment. DC lights flickered on wet pavement. Her phone buzzed constantly, messages, memes, invitations. One text stood out, from a young woman she didn't know. "I watched you. You didn't scream. You didn't snap. You made me believe I could do this too." Karoline sat down at her kitchen table and stared at the message for a while. She had come to Washington as a mouthpiece, a soldier for the cause. Now, something had shifted. She wasn't just defending a president, she was defining a generation. In a world where credentials are constantly weaponized and voices are dismissed based on age or ideology, Karoline Leavitt reminded us of something far more powerful: preparation, conviction, and the courage to speak when others expect you to stay silent. She didn't just respond to an attack, she reframed the entire conversation. And in doing so, she didn't just defend herself. She gave voice to a generation tired of being underestimated. Whether you agree with her politics or not, one truth is undeniable. Karoline didn't just win a debate, she made history in a single sentence. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you or made you think, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Until next time, stay sharp, stay bold, and never let anyone else write your story for you.